What's up everyone, Andrew from NineLeaders here, and today I have a very special guest and a good friend of mine. Her name is Yuliya Schamrel, and she is a senior organizational development consultant for Fisher & Paykel in New Zealand. She's just as passionate about leadership development as myself, and we're going to go through how she uses the Enneagram framework to really improve performance and collaboration within her business. So if this is the first time to the channel, NineLeaders is all about developing new and experienced leaders and giving them the skills to really take on 2021 and beyond. Do not forget to give a thumbs up on the video, as well as smash the subscribe button down below. This is Yuliya Schamrel. Enjoy. Yuliya Schamrel, welcome to NineLeaders. It's absolutely fantastic to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you well?
Thank you for having me, Andrew. Yes, very well. It's 9 p.m. here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Early morning, I believe, in South Africa. Or
Correct.
mid-morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So a little bit of context as to how we know each other. I think it goes back about almost 10 years now, if my maths is correct. We met originally, you were a area leader for Flight Centre Travel Group here in South Africa. And then we were teammates in the Global Sales Academy, which was great. I think that's where we really got to know each other a little bit better. But then 8 years ago, you decided to make the hop over to New Zealand, and you actually headed up GSA, or Global Sales Academy, in Auckland. And it was about 5 or 6 years that you did that. And then the last 2 years, you've been a senior organizational development consultant for Fisher & Paykel. But I mean, we kept in contact throughout that period. I think we were very, very similar roles. You were heading up GSA in New Zealand. I was heading up GSA in South Africa. And I really, really leveraged off a lot of what you were doing. I stole a couple of your ideas. And I think we've got just very similarities when it comes to, obviously, position-wise, but also with our interest in Enneagram and how we use that. So I really just wanted to have you on the show. I really respect your insight and what you've done with Enneagram. So that's really, really exciting. Tell me, how's the last 12 months been for you? What's happening in the COVID world in your space? How have you managed that? You're obviously a mom of 2, which is obviously also adds to the whole complexity. You are incredibly busy. But how have you managed the last 12 months?
Well, I think in New Zealand, we have been incredibly lucky. So we had one really strict lockdown early on. It was 3 months, and it was still allowed to go outside. And it was quite segue into online learning, and at the same time online schooling, and at the same time my 3-year-old joining every single meeting that I was on, saying hello, and the more important the meeting was, the more keen he was to join.
Of course.
So it was definitely a really good study of myself, because when the pressure is up, this is when all your challenges of your personality pop up. And since then we have been back to normal largely. So I think from my position being in organizational development and the workshop space, the remote working made things easier and more inclusive for me. So it shows in my main work. So I work at Fisher & Paykel Appliances. We've got offices in several countries in the world. And before COVID and remote workshop being the new normal, we really only had any connection with our New Zealand people. Whereas when online learning became accessible to everybody, I managed to build connections with people that I never would have met otherwise and getting their perspective, which was amazing. And it also makes it easier to reach different audiences in the world. So, for example, currently, we're in the process of delivering Enneagram in depth course with the coaching room, who are based in Australia.
Yeah.
So Jay, their founding partner, logs in from Sydney, and I log in from Auckland, and we've got students from Australia, Asia, Fiji, which of course would never be possible if we didn't have the online learning. So in a way, that made it easier to engage with people that you wouldn't have engaged otherwise. So
absolutely,
all all things being equal, I think, as well as challenges, the last year also brought some opportunities that wouldn't even be conceivable a
Yeah.
year before.
I think going into this period, I mean, Zoom is now sort of the standard. Everybody knows how to Zoom. Most meetings are taking place over Zoom, whereas 18 months ago, very few people knew how to engage in an online learning space or even online networking, communication, etc., etc. So it's definitely brought more of that globalization sort of mentality that you can actually have very short, quick, powerful meetings, or sessions, learning sessions in a very short space of time. Obviously, you're very involved in part of your role with neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and then specifically Enneagram, which is what we had to talk about today. But just in your role currently, for Fisher and Bickel, is from a learning and development side of things, is that your main focus, or what does your role currently entail?
Yeah, so the being senior OD consultant, it's a mix of delivering learning and development, and it's also about the overall structures that we have in organizations, both for how we work and also how we lead. So it's an engineering company, so even the concepts around leadership are quite a bit more complex than we would be used to before.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to be a part of developing frameworks and applying them. Also, part of my job would be project work within organizational development, and that would vary. So, I suppose what I've noticed is the almost unexpected benefit of us being in lockdown is that now you really did bring your whole self to work, because people could see your children, your dogs, your spouses, and suddenly that line that you draw between my work life and my home life was quite blurred. And it wasn't easy for many people, I'm sure. I certainly had my moments, and at the same time, it also meant that that care about an individual and concerns about well-being have become real, because everybody was kind of in the same boat. Like, we all had different boats.
Yeah.
Somebody had a really pleasant boat that was quiet and oasis-like, and somebody else had quite a chaotic little, dinghy trying to stay afloat. But ultimately, we all had this shared experience that we never had before.
Yeah.
And I think what it meant is that that interest in personality, in how people connect, in how do we get the best out of people and still let them be themselves, I think contributed very positively into space of positive psychology, and seeing that as a really important part of the leadership development. And I must say, I haven't heard a term soft skills in a very long time, because I think people understand that these are not soft skills at all.
Yeah.
These are essential skills. So I found that there's definitely this shift to, what do I need to be a great leader, or what do I need to contribute well or collaborate well? And one needs technical skills and people skills and communication skills. And I really feel like there's a more holistic approach
Yeah.
to not just learning and development, but overall how we view our careers and how we organizationally view people who come in. We want to engage with them, not just on the level of, this is your work. I remember many years ago when we started, it was kind of, leave your shit by the door, nobody will pick it up on the way back. And I remember me saying that to people, thinking, wow, this is so clever. I mean, this is the best metaphor of the year. And now looking back, I'm thinking, like, what are we telling people to do? We're telling them that, we don't care about you as an individual. And I think it was common for just how the work was viewed,
Yeah.
right? And the contribution was viewed. We're paying you for your time, so just show up and do what you need to do. But I think now it's a much more fluid environment where we do value those things.
Absolutely. And I think to what your earlier point was saying, that holistic approach is that in any organization, you need to take the entire person into consideration. Just as you said, this last 12 months have really highlighted that person side of things, that the home life all of those factors now do play a role. And as organizations, as leaders, how do we take that into consideration? And I think it's not necessarily the what we do, but the how we do it has gone up a notch. From that empathy, emotional intelligence, all of those things, to your point earlier as well, is that in the past that would be considered the nice to haves, the soft skills and things, and it's not actually. It really is come to the fore that those are, as you said, I love it, essential skills. I think for the flip side, and this is where from a coaching side comes in, I think that with that term of Zoom fatigue, from a mental state of people not necessarily being in the office and having that separation of work and state, if you want to call it that, from work and home. I mean, for myself, one of the things I've done for a number of years, and perhaps it's a what's the word? It's a fallover from my time in Japan, was for me to finish work, you come home, shoes come off into your comfiest slippers, the work shirt comes off into your comfiest clothes, and now you're at home. And it's almost that separation. Whereas now in the last 12 months, a lot of people haven't had that ability. It's literally your laptop is at your dining room table, you are there, you eat your supper at the dining room table, and you don't have that necessarily that it's almost like Groundhog Day for the last 12 months for a lot of people. And the stresses that come along with that is huge, and a potential effect on productivity, personal lives, emotional states, mental states. So I think this is where I'd love to jump in terms of your work with Enneagram, is going, how over the last 12 months has that really blossomed in terms of people understanding themselves better? How have you contributed to your staff complement, overall well-being and understanding of themselves, and obviously how they integrate into the work community in a different way to what they used to? How's that worked for you?
So at this point, Enneagram forms a part of our Leading People workshop. So all new people and people, leaders who are new to organization, attend Leading People program. And it consists of a foundational workshop and 4 follow-up sessions. So at the foundational workshop, the participants get to experience introduction to the Enneagram session, where they get to know the emotional intelligence pieces, the concepts around our thinking center, feeling center, and body center, which is quite a new concept for some people, whereas it's been around for thousands of years. And after the workshop, then every leader has an individual coaching session unpacking their report. And following that, when we meet up for the cohort sessions, we'll look at the topic of the session through the lens of their personality. So for example, if we talk about giving and receiving feedback, we're going to explore how is your Enneagram profile impacts the way that you give feedback, or how does your Enneagram style influences the way you receive feedback, what goes through your mind when you're about to enter feedback situation. And it's quite interesting to look at those day-to-day concepts and day-to-day things and responsibility of a leader through the lens of their personality, because we all have different opinions about, well, what feedback is, for example. So there is a definition of that, and yet you and I might feel very differently coming into the feedback situation. So the idea there is that we integrate Enneagram in the way we work and the way we lead, and providing somebody the platform for self-awareness and development of that. So I love the Enneagram. I've been doing that for 7 years now. And I've been lucky enough to go through a number of different courses that were looking at the Enneagram through different lenses and presenting it very differently. And I think what it boils down to me too is that it's an amazing self-awareness opportunity, because your challenges of your type and the blind spots and the strengths are all listed there, yet it's only the start of the journey. So sometimes I find people can use Enneagram a bit of like a gospel. It says here that this is what I am, And therefore, I now have an excuse to be like this and not to change. And that's not the point at all. The point is that this is the box that you are in, and we're going to show you the way out. And while the Enneagram is absolutely a phenomenal tool, and I've seen the impact of that on people's professional and personal lives, at the end of the day, as an individual, you are much richer. You've got way many more facets than any, even the best tool in the world is going to cover for you. So I think the premise there is that you need to be prepared to do some work.
Mm.
So just getting your report, which is a very good one, and reading it, it's not going to start the change.
It's got to
The
start with
change
you,
starts
effectively.
through understanding absolutely what works for me, and then I can leave it, and what doesn't work for me, and then I can start working with that.
Yeah.
So I would say, what changes have I seen from the Enneagram? I've seen changes from people who understood their strengths and liabilities and did something with that. Whereas I've also seen people who thought, "Oh, that's interesting," and didn't open it again.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of personal responsibility about what am I going to do with this knowledge, and how I'm going to build myself and grow my personality. And sometimes people just don't want the growth, and it's also okay.
Yeah.
It also can be that maybe this report needs to wait 2-3 years, and then it will be the right time to do something.
Absolutely, and I think it's a tough journey to embark on. Whenever you have a mirror held up to yourself, to your soul, to your mind, your thinking, your emotions, it's a very tough thing to be able to deal with, because it's the reality. It's the rawness of who you are as an individual. So there has to be that sort of that want to understand myself better and how to integrate better with others, and specifically from a leadership side of things. I think the days are gone of the big man leader that stands at the front of the crowd and that just leads via personality and the strength of the personality. We've seen that in politics over the last couple of years, but I think people are becoming a lot more aware of that and the facade that gets put up very much. So again, just peeling back those layers. And I think the amount of times, and to your point earlier, the amount of times I've sat in a coaching session with somebody, having gone through the framework, and there's those light bulb moments. It's, for me, having been coaching, especially from a neuro leadership side of things, your coaching framework is there to create light bulb moments for your coachee. Whereas in Enneagram, absolutely, that's still your role. But I just find the coachees get those light bulb moments so much quicker, having gone through the framework. And again, to your point, it's what you do with it. It's you can take the Enneagram in any number of different avenues. And it really is what you, the outcomes that you're looking for. If it's around integration, if it's about leading people better, if it's around leading business better, or just being more integrated within yourself. Have you seen from a New Zealand context, and you mentioned Australia previously, and that you do quite a bit of work remotely with Australia. What is sort of the uptake of Enneagram in Australasia? Is it something that is growing? Is it something that's not very well known? Because obviously, in Australia, you've got your Myers-Briggs, all of those frameworks, your DISC models, and Enneagram it's been around for a long time, but it just doesn't seem to have actually been as exposed as perhaps MBTI or any of those. What's sort of the status at the moment?
Yeah, I find that now when I say that I'm an Enneagram practitioner, when I introduce myself in some settings, most people know what it is. Whereas when we arrived here 5 years ago, most people asked me to explain what the Enneagram was. It could be that I'm now more finding myself introducing myself in the circles of learning and development and personality. So perhaps that's the change. Definitely HBDI and MBTI and DISC are more well known. And in saying that, for example, our Enneagram in Depth previous course had close to 100 participants.
Really?
Integrative online training that they run always have Pacific Asia, Australasia participants. So I think it's definitely picking up. And what I do know from experience is that if somebody had Enneagram workshop delivered by somebody who does it well, if they've had a coaching session, it just sticks. People talk about it. People remember it. The team members remember each other's Enneagram types. Somehow it's got legs. So even if you don't follow up, people still talk about it because it just makes sense and it resonates on this level where it's rich enough to explain the differences between us. And at the same time, I don't need to remember 16 different 4-letter codes, right? So it's complex enough and it's simple enough to really stay in the forefront. And even when you were talking earlier about, when the person says that, what is driving that behavior? What motivates them? So if an individual, you start asking these questions, that's already a win. Because you're not judging what somebody says straight away, right? You want to understand what is their motivation, what's the thinking, what is it trying to avoid, what are they moving towards. And imagine if everybody started thinking that way instead of going into, this is my position and I'm going to fight for it. So I think I feel like it is, the curve is on the up in terms of how well known the Enneagram is. And what I do know is that the more companies experience it in-house, the more uptake there will be. Because usually people would go, can I have my partner to do this? And then their partner finds out about that. And I go, can we do it at my work? So it's really that word of mouth thing that once somebody experiences it, I find it sticks and it stays. And people want to know about it and they want other people to know about it too. So it might be a slower journey. And I do feel like it is definitely a journey that's way well on the way.
Yeah, I think again, for me, the benefit there is it becomes authentic. It doesn't become a marketing new guru thing that comes out. It's a new flavor of the month. If it's really that word of mouth that people are talking around, the impact that it's made to me as an individual, rather than having it out in public domain, that it's the better your marketing, the better it's going to become. And for me, I don't think Enneagram is the magic wand that's going to fix all your problems. It's going to bring the surface and you have to still do the work to be able to fix that. And then you take
It'll show you your problems very clearly.
Absolutely. And that again, like holding that mirror up to yourself. And then the next layer is going, right, okay, well, how do I integrate with those around me? Then it adds another layer of complexity. So for me, I think the tool is really, I mean, again, we've done DISC, we've done MBTI, we've done HBDI, we've done all of those, and they definitely have their space. And it's not to discount any other of any of the frameworks or the tools. A lot of them speak to very similar sort of things, but from very different lenses, like you used that term earlier. I've just found for myself, Enneagram has been probably the most holistic framework for me to understand myself and how I integrate with others. But then also it gives me the tools to be able to go, right, how do you actually move forward? Rather than just saying, okay, well, this is you, sorry for you, this is what you got to deal with. And like you said earlier, giving you the license just to be you and potentially continue those behaviors that are non-productive. But it actually gives you the tools and the steps to actually overcome that the parts of you that aren't necessarily conducive to living an integrated life. You do use NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, as well. How do you see the correlation between Enneagram and NLP?
I think for me, NLP brought some more tools in which I can coach with the Enneagram. So, for example, if we take one of the basis of the basic concept of NLP is that we as individuals have meta programs that either we run or they run us. And So it's estimated now, I think, at over 60 non-meta programs, and they keep updated. So example of meta program would be introvert, extrovert. So meta program is a scale. So on one side of the scale, you've got introversion, and other side, you've got extroversion. You've got people who are strictly introverts, people who are strictly extroverts, and they're stuck on the scales. You also have people who can adjust. If I'm facilitating in a room of people, I can be extroverted. If I need to work on a project, I can be introverted and have it done. And I actually work better alone. So it means then is that I run this program the way that I want to. I can be flexible and I can adjust to that. Whereas if I'm stuck on either of the sides, then it could become a problem for me in a particular environment. So another example of meta program can be detail, big picture. So a 7 is likely to be stuck at the big picture, not liking the detail, whereas 1, for example, strict perfectionist, is likely to be stuck at the detail and struggle with the big picture. Whereas the idea is that once you realize that you're stuck somewhere, it means that you are losing the opportunity to be big picture when you need to be. And a 7 loses the opportunity to use the detail when they have to be. So the idea is that you just flex those scales, and you become, you run the program, and you decide when you want to do the things you want to do, and not the other way around. So, and pretty much every Enneagram style would have a set of meta programs where they might get stuck. And I find that once you can see that, and you can ask an individual questions that they can start talking about it and seeing that, it makes it very pragmatic and practical with that. All right, so I can see that with my certainty to option scale, I'll prefer options, which means that I struggle with commitment. How can I move closer to be okay with certainty, or the other way around? So I think meta programs bring a lot from NLP into the Enneagram coaching, because it's easy to explain concepts that could be quite complex. And what I like about NLP is that one of the main questions is, so how is it working for you? So ultimately, everything is a strategy. So everything that we do is a strategy that we feel is the best strategy at the moment. And yet there is no single strategy that will be acceptable in any environment, right? So if, for example, you are approached in a dark alley by people wearing masks and not the COVID mask kind, screaming is probably the best thing you could do. So it's a good strategy. If you do that in the boardroom, it's so ultimately, but depending on your environment, it can be productive or it can be non-productive. So it's really about, this is how you chose to be, and how is it working for you? And if it's working for you, leave it, be with that. And if it's not working for you, well, how can you flex it? What other strategies can you find? So again, I find this it's a little bit playful, but at the same time, quite a choiceful approach. So you as an individual have a choice, and even if it's not accepted by anybody else and you don't find it as a problem, you're just not going to change anything, even if the coaching session itself was insightful and wonderful and everybody feels good, because what's important is the changes that we make afterwards. So I do find that NLP and Enneagram work really well together. And in saying that, I find that Enneagram works well with anything, because again, it explains motivation. So even if we take all these frameworks that we talked about before, I like to use the iceberg analogy when somebody is new to the Enneagram and they go, oh, I've done this, I've done HBDI, how do I now lose everything and just concentrate on that? And it's really quite easy to understand that, well, in the behavior level, top of the iceberg, you've got your behavior. And this is where this comes in. Your behavior is driven by your thinking, which is the first layer that's invisible to anybody else. And that's where your HBDI sits in. Now, your thinking is driven by a personality. And this is where MBTI and its derivatives come in. And then your personality is a set of strategies you've developed based on your motivation. And that's what Enneagram explains. So in a way, Enneagram explains why your MBTI personality is your MBTI personality, why your HBDI profile is your HBDI profile, and why is your DISC behavior shows up like that. And that's what I really appreciate about it, that it doesn't say that I am the best, the only framework. It's that I am a framework that's just quite deep down, and therefore is applicable in most situations.
Yeah. And I think that's when you start working at that level as an individual on that core motivation, a lot of other things fall in place. So it's not just that you're working on behavior or trying to change behavior on the surface level, or change thinking on the surface level, or personality. It's really that the deep down motivation. If you can work on that, a lot of other things will fall into place. From a corporate side of things, and you've spoken about how you've used it in business, and in the organization, do you see correlation? I mean, we've had a number of conversations over the years as to sales process, and I've seen a number of courses as to how to use NLP in a sales environment, how to use NLP in a leadership. But sometimes it can be looked as manipulative, because now I'm trying to manipulate you as the buyer or as one of my staff members to get what I want out of you. And I think that's the negative connotation around it. From an Enneagram side of things, how do you use that, from an Enneagram side? How do you use that in performance management, if I can put it that way, to improve someone's performance? Is there a correlation there as well for organizations around performance and productivity?
Yeah, it's always quite hard to manage that ROI. Like, how do we prove that those personal development contributes, and there's a clear dollar sign at the end of that? And one of the times where we did measure some KPIs with in line with the Enneagram was when still at Flight Center we did Enneagram programs with 2 areas. So at the time in New Zealand we had 7 regions or areas, and we did Enneagram coaching programs with 2 of those regions. One, they were located in different parts of New Zealand. They had different performance at the time, so it was quite interesting to see. And then control group was still going the way they were going, with all the other development being exactly the same for all leaders in the company. So with the program, we had introduction. So it was a 12 months program. It had 3 group sessions and 2 individual coaching sessions in between for leaders only. And interestingly enough, that year when we did run this program with Haley and Tracy, so it was really, really good fun. One of these areas had gone on to become a top area globally at Flight Center World, out of probably what would be 150 to 170 areas. And the other area was most productive globally. So it could very well be a coincidence. And at the same time, these were the only 2 areas where we were doing this work. And I think the main message when we worked with the leaders around them being the best leaders they can be is about, first and foremost, you can manage yourself in terms of personality and behaviors and reactions and how you communicate with others. And trying to manage somebody's reaction, or trying to think how the conversation might go and then getting really upset when it doesn't go that way, because of course it wouldn't, it's fundamentally a big waste of time. Whereas if I can manage myself, I can manage my reactions and my perceptions about an individual, and if I can communicate the best I can communicate, this is the outcomes that I have the most influence around. And I think that message really stuck. And especially in sales and performance, you sell better if you're happy at your workplace. And you are happy at your workplace if you are accepted. And I think the leaders who deeply understand themselves and their own strengths and their own challenges are better equipped to deal with other people, because they have less of their own ego that gets in the way. And I think that's what makes a really big difference. So it was approved, yes. Statisticians will probably say that the sample wasn't big enough.
Listen, is
But
that your LLB coming out, your lawyer side of you coming out?
I know, must be that. So, but for the listeners, the areas would be, one area was about 60 people, and the other area would be about 100.
Yeah.
And the control areas would be between maybe 90 and 110 people, with 18 to 20 leaders in each of this area. So actually the sample was large enough to, I think,
And it was purely, you did the work purely with the leaders. You didn't do it with the rest of the staff. It was just with the leadership groups.
No, just leaders. Yeah, it
So it
was
makes a
the
huge
leadership
difference
group. Yeah, what we found was the workshops, the collective workshops were very valuable, because then people gained common language.
Mm-hmm.
And then individual sessions following that were extremely valuable, because then an individual could unpack their own profile. So I think the magic really comes in a combination of both.
Yeah.
So individual coaching session on their own, they are very effective for an individual. Workshops on their own are great at introducing people to the new framework that they can relate and work with. And when you combine both, I feel like that's what creates action.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what worked really well for us.
It's so interesting, again, like you said, that the work was only done with the leaders, and it had these results, the waterfall effect down to the rest of the staff. And very often when you talk, especially in the last 12 months, the point of failure is often leadership, either great leadership or crappy leadership. The point of failure for any group, community, business, whatever it is very often, 90% of the time, is the leadership. So I mean, it's a fascinating example that you've got there. In terms of that, going into 2021 now, it's obviously we're used to I hate the word or the term new normal. It is what it is. We're never going to go back to pre-COVID times. But from a leadership side of things, looking forward into the next 24 months, what do you feel is going to be the biggest need, or the biggest skills that leaders need to have to manage this time where there's so much uncertainty, so much volatility, all of that? What are going to be the biggest skills that leaders require?
It's quite a big question here, Andrew. Thank you.
I'll
Big
just throw it out there.
Yeah,
it's my seven coming through. I'm looking to the future. Come now.
I know. Let's do that. So I think there are a few buckets, and the buckets is manage work, manage self, manage others.
Yeah.
So in terms of managing work, leaders need to be comfortable with online tools and online collaboration tools, and being able to follow as well as lead, because usually leader still reports to a leader.
Yeah.
And in the environment where a lot of things happen virtually, you really need to be aligned, and truly aligned. I think people will smell the bullshit very, very quickly. So, so first, the leader needs to be able to lead and to follow when needed, and to collaborate with others. So that's kind of your own. That's leading work. Then leading self comes in, and this is your emotional intelligence, is your self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, building social connections, and really paying good attention to that. So all the foundation steps of emotional intelligence, I feel, is something that every leader should know. It needs to be part of a leader 101 course. So that's your leading self. And then you go with leading others. And this is again where, for me, leader facilitator comes up as something that I would really aspire to lead into organizations. And leader facilitator, as in, I am going to remove the roadblocks for you, and I'm going to create this challenging and yet satisfying environment where you can apply yourself fully as an individual, and where you can grow. And I really like the article about the Google project that was called Aristotle. And it's a good article in New York Times. So if you just Google Aristotle project, it will come up as one of the search points. And it talks about how Google went on this hunt of understanding what makes the great teams. And of course, being the search engine, they're very good at looking for patterns and behaviors.
Yeah.
And they looked at 180 teams, and they just couldn't find any pattern. They looked at how much time of work people spent together, their backgrounds, the size of the team, the nationality. So they looked at everything, and there was just no pattern. There was no team combination of people when you just looked at the face value of people that worked. So they started then moving a bit further down, and they started looking at how these teams work together. And the two things that they have come up, and they've realized that these are the two things that the well-performing team, the high-performing team, do the best: psychological safety, which again, the term that's been brought up a lot this year, that I can be myself, I can disagree, I can make a mistake, I can have a bad day. I can also expect my leader to speak with me if I'm having too many bad days in a row. So that's psychological safety. It's a really complex term that probably requires the podcast of its own, and I think people misconstrue it quite a lot.
Yeah.
So that was one, and the other one was the conversational equity. So in a team, how much time does every individual spends talking to others?
That's
And it's not important in one meeting on one day, but looking at the week or looking at the months, the teams were more or less, team members had a very similar airtime, were the teams that were high performing teams. So for me then, in that context, a leader that can lead great high performing teams is the leader who is aware of these things. How is what am I doing helps create the environment of psychological safety, conversational equity in the room, or how are my behaviors getting in the way of creating psychological safety, conversational equity in the room? And I think the awareness that's required to do that well, and to do that often enough, that's the hard work that a leader needs help with. Because you need to think about your operational goals, and yet that developmental goals are just as real in an organization. So it's quite a bit of a balance. And I think this is where we come in from the coaching point of view, is to create space for an individual to reflect at how well have I done this week.
I think just listening to you talk now, and how tough leadership actually is, and particularly when you're leading in crisis. As you know, I used to do martial arts, and I've done karate and Iaido and all of those. And almost the mindset of when you start a martial art is to get that black belt. That's like the ultimate goal. The reality is that when you get that, suddenly that's when the journey actually begins. That's when you start really, and I relate that back to leadership very often, is people aspire to leadership because of the title, because of the position, the perks, all of that you get. But actually, once you achieve that title, you step into a place of leadership, suddenly you realize the burden that it can become. And the fast forward in terms of how much you actually need to do, the work that you need to do in yourself and on yourself to be able to lead people effectively. Because again, the success of my business or my community is going to be the point of failure as I'm the leader. And it's what I do and the behaviors that I exhibit that is really going to drive the business forward, or alternatively the community, or whatever it is, or hold them back potentially. So listen, that's great feedback and great insight around leadership in 2021. I really do appreciate it. We're definitely going to have another catch up, get more in depth on certain topics. It's been absolutely fascinating having you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, we can definitely catch up soon and do another session. We'll have to pencil that into the diary.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate
your
it.
time.
All right. Well, listen, take care of yourself. Love to the family on that side. And like I said, we'll catch up soon.
Perfect.
All right, Jules. Take care.
Thanks.
And that's it for today. So I really hope you've got some value out of this video. If you have, hit the thumbs up button and smash the subscribe button down below. If you'd like to join our 9Leaders newsletter, the link is in the description below. Just go and click on that. Otherwise, all the best and have a great one. Cheers. Bye.